Sometimes, the people standing closest to power are the ones who understand it the least. The Grand Crescent Hotel shimmered beneath thousands of crystal lights, its marble floors reflecting the glow of one of the most exclusive charity galas in New York City. Luxury cars lined the entrance for nearly half a mile. CEOs, celebrities, investors, and politicians stepped through the towering glass doors wearing tailored suits and designer gowns worth more than many families earned in a year. Inside, a string quartet played softly beneath a ceiling draped in golden chandeliers. Everything about the evening was designed to celebrate success, wealth, status, appearances. 8-year-old Ethan Carter stood quietly near the edge of the ballroom, his small navy blazer slightly too large for his frame. He held a cream-colored invitation carefully in both hands, as if it were something precious. Around him, conversations floated through the air. Laughter, champagne glasses clinking, expensive shoes crossing polished marble. Ethan felt small among it all, but he didn't seem intimidated. He simply watched, calm, observant, patient, the kind of patience children rarely possessed. Across the room, photographers suddenly gathered near the grand staircase. A wave of excitement spread through the crowd. Vanessa Sinclair had arrived. The billionaire's fiancée moved through the ballroom like someone accustomed to being admired. Her silver gown sparkled beneath the lights. People smiled before she even reached them. Some stepped aside without being asked. Others hurried forward hoping for a brief conversation. Vanessa welcomed every glance, every compliment, every camera flash. Tonight was important. Rumors had already begun circulating that billionaire entrepreneur William Harrison would make a major announcement before the evening ended. Many believed it would be the official unveiling of their wedding plans. Vanessa certainly looked like a woman preparing for exactly that moment. As she approached the VIP section, her eyes scanned the room automatically. Then she stopped. Her expression changed, just slightly, but enough, because standing near the reserved guest entrance was Ethan. Alone, quiet, completely out of place, at least from her perspective. Vanessa frowned. She looked around for a parent, a nanny, a staff member, anyone. She found none. Her heels clicked sharply across the floor as she walked toward him. Several guests noticed. Conversation slowed. Ethan looked up politely when she stopped in front of him. "Excuse me," Vanessa said, forcing a smile that never reached her eyes. "Where are your parents?" Ethan held his invitation against his chest. "My mom is working tonight." Vanessa's gaze dropped briefly toward the invitation, then toward his jacket, then back to his face. Something about his answer seemed to irritate her. "Working," she repeated. "You mean she's on staff?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, ma'am." A few nearby guests exchanged curious glances. Vanessa's smile tightened. "Then I think you're in the wrong area." Ethan blinked. "I don't think so." The response was respectful, gentle, but it caught her off guard. "This section is reserved for invited guests," Vanessa explained. "I am invited," Ethan said quietly, lifting the cream-colored envelope. Vanessa stared at it, then laughed softly. Not because it was funny, because she didn't believe him. Around them, more people had started paying attention. The room wasn't silent. Not yet. But something was changing. A current. A shift. The beginning of a moment nobody would forget. Vanessa reached for the invitation. Ethan hesitated for only a second before handing it over. She examined it quickly. Her eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, she tore the invitation cleanly down the middle. Gasps echoed from nearby tables. Ethan froze. Vanessa dropped the pieces into his hands. "There," she said. "Problem solved." For the first time all evening, the boy looked genuinely hurt. Not angry, not embarrassed, just confused. He stared at the torn paper resting in his palms. The ballroom suddenly felt much larger, much colder. Yet Ethan didn't cry. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. Instead, he carefully picked up both halves of the invitation and held them together. Then he looked up at Vanessa and asked a simple question that would soon haunt everyone in that room. "Can I keep it?" The question seemed so small that most people barely noticed it. Yet for reasons nobody could explain, it lingered in the air long after Ethan spoke. Vanessa stared at the boy for a moment, clearly expecting tears, excuses, or perhaps a desperate attempt to defend himself. Instead, she found herself looking into calm blue eyes that carried none of those things. Ethan simply waited for an answer. Around them, the crowd shifted awkwardly. A few guests looked away. Others suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating. It was easier not to get involved. Easier to pretend nothing uncomfortable had happened. Vanessa folded her arms. "Keep whatever you want," she said dismissively. "But you should leave this area." Ethan lowered his eyes to the torn invitation and carefully slipped both pieces into the inside pocket of his blazer. His movements were slow and deliberate, as if the paper still mattered. Then he nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am." No anger. No argument. Just dignity. Somehow that made several people feel even worse. Ethan turned and began walking away from the center of the ballroom. The music continued. Conversations slowly resumed. Yet something had changed. The atmosphere felt slightly heavier. Less perfect. Less polished. Across the enormous ballroom, hidden behind a pair of service doors, Emily Carter was balancing a silver tray loaded with sparkling water glasses. Like dozens of other staff members, she had spent the entire day preparing for the event. For 14 straight hours, she had worked without complaint. She moved efficiently through crowded hallways and busy kitchens, helping wherever she was needed. Most guests never noticed her. That was fine with Emily. She preferred it that way. At 31, she had learned that invisible people often saw the world most clearly. Her blonde hair was neatly secured beneath a simple service uniform. Her posture remained straight despite exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. Every dollar earned tonight mattered. Rent, school supplies, groceries. The realities of ordinary life did not disappear simply because wealthy people were celebrating in a ballroom. One of the younger servers approached her near the kitchen entrance. "Emily, I think I saw your son near the main floor earlier." Emily smiled immediately. Was he behaving? Honestly, better than most adults here. Emily laughed softly. That sounded exactly like Ethan. She checked the time. He had promised to remain near the observation area until she finished her shift. Ethan rarely broke promises. Still, something tugged at her instincts. A mother's instinct. Quiet, persistent, difficult to ignore. She glanced toward the ballroom doors. Meanwhile, Ethan found a quiet corner beside a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Thousands of city lights glittered below like scattered stars. He removed the torn invitation once more and carefully smoothed the creases with his fingers. The paper looked damaged now, but he refused to throw it away, because it had taken weeks to arrive. Weeks of waiting. Weeks of wondering whether it was real. Ethan reached into another pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. He unfolded the cloth carefully. Inside rested an old silver watch. The metal showed signs of age. The leather strap had been repaired more than once. Yet Ethan handled it like treasure. He studied the watch quietly. Then he smiled. A private smile. One connected to a memory only he understood. Not far away, several members of the event's executive board were making their way through the ballroom toward the stage. One of them happened to glance toward the lonely boy sitting by the window. His eyes briefly landed on the silver watch resting in Ethan's hands. The man took 2 more steps before stopping completely. His expression changed. The color drained from his face. Then he turned back and stared, this time much more carefully. Robert Langford had attended every Harrison Foundation Gala for nearly 12 years. During that time, he had met presidents, billionaires, royalty, and celebrities. Very little surprised him anymore. Yet as he stood near the ballroom window staring at the silver watch in Ethan's hands, he felt something he had not experienced in years. Genuine disbelief. Robert slowed his pace and looked again. The watch appeared ordinary to anyone else. Old, worn, slightly scratched. Nothing about it suggested extraordinary value. But Robert knew better. Because 20 years earlier, he had personally helped organize the private exhibition where the Harrison family collection had first been displayed. Only 3 identical watches had ever existed. Commissioned decades ago by William Harrison's grandfather. Each handcrafted in Switzerland. Each engraved with a symbol that almost nobody knew existed. Robert's pulse quickened. Surely it could not be the same watch. There had to be another explanation. He adjusted his glasses and moved closer. Ethan noticed the older man approaching and immediately sat up straighter. "Good evening, sir," Ethan said politely. Robert barely heard him. His eyes remained fixed on the watch. Then he saw it. A tiny engraving near the edge of the case. A falcon surrounded by a circular crest. The Harrison family insignia. Robert froze. For several seconds he simply stared. The ballroom noise faded into the background. The music disappeared. Even the city lights beyond the window seemed distant. "Young man," Robert finally said, "may I ask where you got that watch?" Ethan glanced down at it. His fingers wrapped around it protectively. "Not out of suspicion, out of affection. It belongs to me." Robert nodded slowly. "Yes, I can see that." His voice softened. "But where did it come from?" Ethan hesitated. His mother had always taught him not to discuss private family matters with strangers. Still, there was something kind about the older man's face. Something trustworthy. It was a gift. Robert swallowed. "From your father?" Ethan looked toward the ballroom floor where hundreds of guests continued celebrating. "Sort of." The answer raised more questions than it answered. Before Robert could continue, movement near the main stage suddenly drew everyone's attention. Spotlights brightened. Conversations quieted. Members of the foundation board began taking their seats. At the center of it all stood William Harrison. Even from across the room, his presence commanded attention. Tall, composed, confident. The kind of confidence built over decades of success rather than inherited from wealth alone. Guests turned toward him instinctively. Investors stopped talking. Reporters adjusted cameras. William offered a brief smile as he prepared to address the audience. Tonight should have felt like a victory. The foundation had raised record-breaking donations. His company had experienced its strongest year ever. The future appeared perfectly arranged. Yet beneath the polished exterior, William felt oddly distracted. A feeling he could not explain. Something unsettled him. Perhaps it was the tension he had noticed earlier among a few guests. Perhaps it was Vanessa appearing more concerned with social appearances than charitable causes. Whatever the reason, his thoughts seemed unusually distant. As William reviewed notes near the stage, Vanessa returned to his side. Her expression had already recovered from the earlier incident. At least outwardly. "Everything is ready," she said. William nodded. "Good. The evening is going perfectly." For some reason, those words felt inaccurate the moment she spoke them. Across the ballroom, Robert Langford was still staring at Ethan. Then he looked toward William. Then back at the watch. Slowly, carefully, Robert reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands trembled slightly as he searched through old photographs stored in a private archive. A few seconds later, he found exactly what he feared. The image appeared on his screen. 3 identical silver watches displayed inside a velvet case. Robert compared the photograph to the watch in Ethan's hands. Every detail matched. Every engraving. Every marking. Every scratch visible along the edge. His breath caught in his throat. Because according to Harrison family records, one of those watches had disappeared nearly 9 years ago. And now somehow, impossibly, it was resting in the hands of an 8-year-old boy sitting alone by a ballroom window. Some secrets do not announce themselves. They wait, quietly, patiently, until the right moment arrives. Robert Langford lowered his phone slowly, unable to take his eyes off the boy by the window. Every instinct told him he should walk directly to William Harrison and show him the photograph. Yet another part of him hesitated. Because if he was right, this was not merely an interesting coincidence. It was something capable of changing lives. Across the ballroom, William stepped onto the stage. Applause rolled through the room like distant thunder. Spotlights followed him as he approached the podium. His tailored black tuxedo reflected the soft glow of crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. He looked exactly as everyone expected a billionaire to look. Composed, successful, untouchable. The crowd settled into silence. William thanked donors, volunteers, and community leaders. His voice was calm and confident. The audience listened carefully. Some admired him. Others envied him. Most simply respected him. Yet even while speaking, William found his attention drifting toward the far side of the ballroom. He could not explain why. Something felt different tonight. Something unseen moved beneath the polished surface of the evening. Near the service entrance, Emily finally finished delivering her tray. The moment she had been waiting for all night had arrived. A brief 10-minute break. She removed her server gloves and glanced toward the ballroom floor. Instantly, she began searching for Ethan. She always searched for Ethan, the way mothers do. Within seconds, she spotted him near the window. Relief softened her features. Then she noticed the torn pieces of paper in his hands. Her smile disappeared. Emily knew immediately something had happened. Not because Ethan looked upset. He did not. It was because he looked too calm, too thoughtful. The same expression he wore whenever he was protecting someone else's feelings instead of his own. She crossed the ballroom quietly, careful not to attract attention. Ethan looked up the moment he saw her approaching. His face brightened instantly. "Mom." Emily knelt beside him. "Hey, sweetheart." Her eyes moved to the folded pieces of paper. "What happened?" Ethan hesitated. Not because he wanted to hide the truth. Because he wanted to tell it gently. "A lady thought I was in the wrong place." Emily felt her stomach tighten. Did she say anything unkind? Ethan considered the question carefully. Then he shrugged. Maybe she was having a bad day. Emily closed her eyes for half a second. The answer hurt more than any complaint could have, because kindness often revealed the size of a person's heart. And Ethan's heart was bigger than most adults. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and smiled. "You are okay?" "I am okay." Then Ethan reached into his pocket and showed her the watch. "I kept it safe." Emily's expression softened immediately. The silver watch caught the ballroom lights, sending tiny reflections across the polished floor. "Good," she whispered. "Very good." Neither of them noticed Robert Langford watching from across the room. He had seen the entire exchange. The tenderness, the familiarity, the way Emily looked at the watch. Suddenly, another realization struck him. He knew that expression. He had seen it before. Years ago, on someone else's face. Slowly, Robert turned his attention toward William Harrison standing beneath the spotlight. Then back toward Emily Carter. For the first time all evening, a possibility entered his mind that seemed almost impossible to ignore. The most important discoveries rarely begin with certainty. They begin with a feeling that refuses to disappear. Robert Langford stood motionless near the edge of the ballroom as pieces of a puzzle started fitting together inside his mind. The silver watch, Emily Carter, the timing, the age of the boy. Individually, none of it proved anything. Together, it became impossible to ignore. Across the room, applause filled the ballroom as William Harrison concluded another portion of his speech. Donors smiled. Cameras flashed. The evening continued exactly as planned. Yet Robert no longer heard the applause. His attention remained fixed on the small family sitting quietly by the window. Emily glanced at the stage. Like everyone else, she knew who William Harrison was. Most Americans did. His companies appeared in financial headlines almost weekly. His charitable foundation funded schools, hospitals, and scholarship programs across the country. To Emily, however, he was simply another distant figure standing under bright lights while ordinary people carried on with ordinary lives. Or at least that was what she told herself. Ethan followed her gaze toward the stage. "That is him, right?" he asked softly. Emily immediately knew who he meant. "Yes." Ethan studied William from across the ballroom. "He looks different in person." Emily smiled faintly. "Most people do." The answer seemed simple enough. Yet Robert noticed the exchange. Every word. Every glance, every reaction. His pulse quickened again. Nearby, members of the foundation board were gathering for the next segment of the evening. One of them approached Robert. "Everything all right?" Robert hesitated. Then he looked toward William. "I'm not sure." "About what?" Robert lowered his voice. "Tell me something. Has William ever spoken publicly about that missing watch?" The board member frowned. "No." "What?" Robert glanced toward Ethan. The man followed his gaze. Within seconds, his expression changed. "Is that?" "I believe so." Silence settled between them, not because they lacked words, because neither wanted to say the obvious possibility aloud. Back near the window, Emily checked the time and sighed quietly. Her break was almost over. Soon she would return to carrying trays and serving guests who would never remember her name. Ethan seemed to sense her disappointment. "I am okay, Mom." Emily squeezed his hand. "I know you are. And I did not let anything happen to the watch." Her eyes softened again. "I know that too." Ethan smiled proudly. Then he carefully opened the silver cover. Inside, hidden beneath the clock face, was a tiny photograph. A photograph he had looked at hundreds of times. Emily immediately noticed. "Ethan." He looked up. "Sorry." She was not upset, only cautious. The photograph was personal, precious, the kind of thing she rarely allowed anyone else to see. But the moment had already passed, because from across the room, Robert had caught a glimpse of it. Only a glimpse, barely a second, yet it was enough. His heart nearly stopped. The image inside the watch showed a younger William Harrison standing beside a smiling woman on a windy beach nearly a decade earlier. Robert knew the photograph. He had seen it before. It had once been reported missing along with the watch itself. Suddenly, every doubt vanished. This was not coincidence. This was not a misunderstanding. Somehow, impossibly, an 8-year-old boy sitting alone by a ballroom window possessed an item that should have been in William Harrison's private family collection for nearly 10 years. And for the first time that evening, Robert made a decision. He turned toward the stage and began walking directly toward William Harrison. Some truths stay buried because nobody knows where to look. Others stay buried because nobody dares to ask the right question. William Harrison stepped away from the podium as applause swept across the ballroom once again. The foundation presentation had gone exactly as planned. On the surface, everything remained perfect. Yet before he could return to his seat, Robert Langford approached him with an urgency that immediately caught his attention. Robert was not a man who panicked. In 20 years, William had never seen him look unsettled. Until now. "William, I need 5 minutes." William studied his expression. "Is something wrong?" Robert glanced around carefully. "I'm not sure, but I think you need to see something." The seriousness in his voice erased any temptation to dismiss the request. William nodded. "Show me." Together, they stepped away from the crowd and moved toward a quieter section of the ballroom. Robert handed over his phone. William frowned as he looked at the photograph displayed on the screen. 3 silver watches resting inside a velvet case. Instantly, he recognized them. His grandfather's collection. Family heirlooms. Priceless not because of their value, but because of their history. Then William noticed the date beneath the image. His expression changed. "Where did you get this?" "Foundation archives." William looked up. "Why are you showing me this tonight?" Robert hesitated, then pointed toward the far window overlooking Manhattan. "Because one of them is sitting over there." For a moment, William simply stared. "That is impossible." "I thought so too." William followed Robert's gaze. Across the ballroom, he saw a small boy sitting beside a woman wearing a service uniform. Nothing about the scene appeared remarkable, yet Robert remained completely serious. "The watch is real, William." William's eyes narrowed. "You are certain?" "I saw the engraving." Silence followed. The kind of silence that appears when logic and reality stop agreeing with one another. Nearly 9 years earlier, one watch had vanished during a private family event. Investigators never found it. Insurance companies closed the case. Life moved on. Eventually, William stopped thinking about it. Until now. Across the room, Ethan was listening as Emily quietly explained that her break was ending. "I have to go back to work soon." Ethan nodded. "I know. Will you be okay for another hour?" "Of course." Emily smiled. He always answered that way. Mature beyond his years. Thoughtful. Independent. Sometimes more independent than she wanted. Ethan looked toward the stage where William stood speaking with Robert. "Mom." "Yes." "Do you think important people are happier?" The question surprised her. Emily followed his gaze. Then she looked back at her son. "Some are. Some are not." "Why?" Emily considered the answer carefully. "Because money can solve certain problems, but it cannot decide what kind of person someone becomes." Ethan seemed satisfied with that explanation. Meanwhile, William continued staring across the ballroom. He expected to feel suspicion. Instead, he felt curiosity. Something about the boy seemed strangely familiar. Not his face exactly, more the way he carried himself. The calmness, the quiet confidence. William could not explain it. Robert lowered his voice. "There is one more thing." William looked at him. "What?" Robert paused. The boy was carrying a photograph inside the watch. William felt a sudden tension in his chest. "What photograph?" "You." The noise of the ballroom seemed to disappear. For a brief moment, even the music faded into the background. William stared at Robert without speaking. Then slowly, almost unconsciously, his eyes found the boy again. This time he did not see a stranger sitting by a window. This time he saw a question. And for the first time that evening, William Harrison started walking toward Ethan Carter. William Harrison had spent most of his life reading people. Investors, competitors, journalists, politicians. Success often depended on recognizing what others tried to hide. Yet as he crossed the ballroom toward Ethan Carter, he felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. The boy noticed him approaching almost immediately. So did several nearby guests. Conversations softened. Heads turned. The distance between them was not far, perhaps 30 feet, but it felt much longer. William stopped beside the window. For a moment, neither spoke. Manhattan's lights shimmered behind the glass. The orchestra continued playing somewhere across the room. Ethan looked up politely. "Hello, sir." William nodded. Hello. His eyes dropped briefly toward the silver watch resting in Ethan's hands. Up close there was no doubt. It was real. Every detail matched his memory. Every scratch, every engraving, every mark left behind by time. William found himself staring at the watch longer than intended. Ethan noticed. Do you like watches? The question almost made William smile. This one, yes. Ethan carefully closed the cover. It is my favorite thing. William glanced toward the empty chair beside him. May I sit down? Ethan nodded. Sure. As William lowered himself into the chair, several guests nearby pretended not to watch. None of them succeeded. Across the ballroom, Vanessa noticed immediately. Her smile faded. She excused herself from a conversation and began moving closer. Meanwhile, Emily had just returned to work carrying a tray of sparkling water. The moment she saw William sitting beside Ethan, her footsteps slowed. The tray suddenly felt heavier. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, from recognition. Old memories have a strange way of returning without warning. William studied Ethan carefully. How old are you? 8. Do you enjoy events like this? Ethan considered the question. Not really. William raised an eyebrow. Why not? Ethan glanced around the ballroom. Everybody seems busy trying to impress each other. For a moment, William forgot to respond. The answer sounded far older than 8 years. Ethan shrugged. The food is good, though. A laugh escaped William before he could stop it. Genuine. Unexpected. Nearby guests looked surprised. They rarely saw that side of him. Then William nodded toward the watch. Who gave it to you? Ethan's expression softened instantly. My mom. William felt his heartbeat slow, then accelerate again. Where did she get it? Ethan looked down at the watch. She said it belonged to someone important once. William remained silent. Ethan continued. But she told me important things are not valuable because they belong to important people. William listened carefully. Then why are they valuable? Ethan smiled. Because they remind us who we are. The answer landed with unexpected force. Across the ballroom, Emily stopped completely. She had heard those words before, because she had spoken them herself years ago. William stared at Ethan. Then slowly, almost unconsciously, his eyes lifted toward Emily. Their gazes met across the crowded ballroom. The world seemed to pause. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Yet in that single moment, something long buried beneath years of silence began rising toward the surface. There are moments when the past does not knock before entering. It simply appears and waits to be recognized. Emily Carter stood perfectly still beside the service station, her hands resting on the silver tray she had almost forgotten she was carrying. Across the ballroom, William Harrison continued looking at her. 8 years had changed many things. Success had added silver to his temples. Responsibility had sharpened the lines around his eyes. Time had transformed both of them. Yet recognition arrived instantly. Not because of what had changed, because of what had not. For several seconds, neither moved. The noise of the gala continued around them. Laughter, music, conversations. But between William and Emily, there was only silence. Ethan looked from one to the other, sensing something unusual. Mom, he called gently. The sound finally broke the moment. Emily took a slow breath and walked toward them. Her posture remained calm. Her expression remained composed. She did not rush. She did not panic. She simply walked forward with the same quiet dignity she carried through every difficult day of her life. Guests nearby began noticing. Some recognized William. Others recognized Emily as one of the event staff. Curiosity spread quickly. Vanessa arrived just as Emily reached the table. Her smile disappeared immediately. William, she asked. What is going on? William never looked away from Emily. I was about to ask the same question. Emily lowered her eyes briefly toward Ethan. Then she looked back at William. Hello, William. Hearing her say his name after so many years felt strangely familiar, almost unsettling. William stood slowly. Emily. Vanessa's confusion deepened. She looked from one face to the other. You know each other? Neither answered immediately. Ethan watched carefully. His fingers remained wrapped around the silver watch. William's gaze drifted toward it once more, then back to Emily. I thought it was lost. Emily understood instantly. The watch. William nodded. I searched for it. Emily's expression softened. I know. 1,000 questions filled William's mind. Why had she disappeared? Why had she never contacted him? Why did Ethan have the watch? Yet somehow only one question reached his lips. Why did you keep it? Emily looked toward Ethan. Her answer came quietly. Because some promises matter. William felt something shift inside him. The same feeling that had followed him all evening. The sense that something important stood just beyond his understanding. Vanessa folded her arms. I am sorry, but can someone explain what is happening? Nobody responded. Not immediately, because the conversation no longer belonged to her. Nearby guests had stopped pretending not to watch. Even members of the board stood silently observing. Robert Langford remained several feet away, saying nothing, waiting. Emily reached down and gently adjusted Ethan's blazer. A mother's small gesture. Familiar. Protective. Then Ethan looked up at William with complete innocence. Do you know my mom? William opened his mouth. The answer should have been simple. Yet somehow it was not. Before he could respond, Ethan added another question. A question so ordinary that nobody expected what it would do to the room. Have you ever met my dad? The silence that followed felt heavier than any speech given that night. Emily closed her eyes briefly. William stared at Ethan. And for the first time, he truly looked at the boy. The shape of his smile. The color of his eyes. The calm confidence. The familiar way he tilted his head while waiting for an answer. Suddenly the distance between questions and answers felt much smaller than it had only moments before. The question hung in the air like a bell that had been struck but never stopped ringing. Ethan waited patiently. William Harrison did not answer immediately. For perhaps the first time in years, the billionaire who always seemed to know exactly what to say found himself searching for words. Emily stood quietly beside her son. She did not interrupt. She did not rescue the moment. She simply allowed the truth to arrive at its own pace. Around them, the ballroom had grown strangely quiet. Conversations faded. Music continued somewhere in the distance, yet few people seemed to hear it anymore. Even Vanessa remained silent. William slowly lowered his eyes toward the silver watch, then toward the photograph hidden inside it, then finally toward Ethan. I think, William said carefully, that I may have known him once. Ethan smiled. Mom said he was a good man. Emily looked away for a moment. William felt those words more deeply than he expected, because he knew he had not always been a good man. Ambitious, yes. Successful, certainly. But good? That answer felt far more complicated. Ethan continued innocently. She said he never knew about me. The silence that followed seemed to spread across the entire room. William looked at Emily. Her eyes met his calmly. There was no accusation there. No bitterness. No anger. Only honesty. The kind of honesty that becomes impossible to ignore. William finally understood. Not all of it. Not every missing piece. But enough. More than enough. His gaze returned to Ethan. The age. The timing. The watch. The photograph. The familiar smile. Suddenly none of it felt impossible anymore. Vanessa took a small step forward. William. Her voice sounded uncertain now. For the first time that evening, she no longer appeared confident. William never looked at her. Instead, he knelt slightly so he could speak to Ethan at eye level. What is your full name? Ethan answered without hesitation. Ethan Carter. Then he paused. Mom says names matter because they tell stories. William nodded slowly. She is right. Ethan smiled. What does your name mean? A faint laugh escaped William. Soft. Emotional. Real. I think I am still figuring that out. Robert Langford watched quietly from nearby. So did the board members. So did dozens of guests who had witnessed the entire evening unfold. Earlier they had seen a boy dismissed because he seemed ordinary. Now they were witnessing something very different. Not a scandal. Not a spectacle. Something far more powerful. The truth. William rose to his feet. Then he turned toward Emily. You never asked me for anything. It was not a question. Emily shook her head. No. You could have. That was never the point. William closed his eyes briefly. The weight of those words settled heavily upon him. Because she was right. Everything about her presence proved it. She had not come seeking status. She had not demanded attention. She had spent the evening serving drinks while protecting her son's dignity. In the end, that was what everyone remembered. Not wealth. Not influence. Not social status. Dignity. Ethan slipped his hand into Emily's. William looked at them both and smiled. A genuine smile. Then, quietly enough that only those nearest could hear, he said, Thank you for keeping the promise when I did not even know there was one to keep. No one applauded. No one spoke. The room simply stood still. Because sometimes the most powerful moment is not when a secret is revealed. It is when a person's character is revealed. And that night, beneath crystal chandeliers and surrounded by people chasing importance. A waitress and her son reminded everyone that true worth never comes from a title, a fortune, or a last name. It comes from the courage to carry the truth with grace, even when nobody is watching.